I watched The Boys for the palm-colored Crayola creep. This snow sardine, the one that looks like Aryan Jimmy Fallon. I'm seeded. I'm not afraid to admit that. Every time Homelander walks into frame, it's like a vine boom of aura has entered the scene. Bro is undomesticated, and his frenzied acts are entertaining in a world concocted to critique what exists. What exists, you may ask? Now, I know seeing a white man in a business suit telling y'all we're getting black jobs edges the chode of territorial toothpaste totalitarians down south, but let's take 2 steps back, add the social factors, subtract the subversion, divide literacy, and come up with a social equation for villain. What makes a villain? I mean, what makes them tick? What ideology is stored in their fists? How do they denounce goodness with the cursed existence of life they embody? Do we even dislike villains? Do you? I mean, come on, did you cheer for Joe Biden? Or did you just cheer against Trump? Villains can come in all forms, from the prepubescent antics of Cartman, deriving out of a childlike naivety from a white child's experience, to a black child's one like Riley from the Boondocks.
This is Robert Freeman's other grandson, Riley. He's empowered by the prospect of a black president, but not in the way society would hope or expect.
To the genocidal warlocks of mythical realms present in anime. Watashi wa star, nigga! There are a lot of ways to write villains, but combining imaginative evil with very real Western existential dread seems to be the end goal of critique here, right? I'm really interested with how we react to media in a public sense. And me, I'm a side picker. So you know I love delving into the complexities of lore concerning actions, reactions, and fathomatizations of these characters in all their respective worlds, externalized onto ours. Because sometimes the villains aren't even villains. In My Hero Academia, Megan Thee Stallion likes it. It's not taboo anymore. Okay. Carry on, Gaynor. I was very drawn to the hero killers, the League of Villains, specifically because of their critiques of hero society. You see, Deku, the main character, goes to the school called MHA, My Hero Academia, a school which manufactures superheroes with innate powerful quirks to effectively police the wrongdoings of society. Basically, 80% of the world is given a quirk in this world, and with equitable power dynamics, the villains, or bad people in society, run amok, spreading chaos, duress. She serves. And the heroes form literal symbols of peace, ushering a more equitable tomorrow for the society of today. Or at least that's what My Hero Academia argues. You see, unlike The Boys, My Hero Academia is a superhero series prided on voicing how the world should be, meaning the oppression of our villains is invalidated under the construct of peace created by the heroes. We're told the only reason society is like this is because of its lack of control with horrible quirk users, and governance surrounding a symbol of peace is the epitome of social order we can achieve. We're never meant to question it either. Just believe Deku can replace God. This is God. This is God, by the way. This is My Hero Academia God. Shigaraki, the leader of the League of Villains, doesn't want to kill God for an expectation of violence. Shigaraki wants to kill God because the symbol of hope mitigates the reality of violence faced by his friends in the League of Villains, a group of people from differing marginalized groups. 2 of them suffering from mental health issues, one of them being abandoned, abused, and burned alive as a child, one of them being black, argue with the fucking wall, one of them being trans and even dying in the series while doing no sort of injustice except joining a social order which accepted her. God is Satan to Shigaraki, a Satan that guarantees the hellish conditions of his friends and himself. He knows these conditions will continue too, unless structure is shifted in the form of God's death. And Deku is just Jesus, destined to continue the wrongdoings of the previous god. When you don't recognize the illusion of peace a tolerance of social order brings forth in the form of violence, death, and marginalization, the villains being critiqued all of a sudden become the very same people proactively being casted out of society. You don't need to critique a world in which trans people are oppressed in order to critique America. You just need to critique America. If all your critique of a villain amounts to the social displacement of certain types of people, well, you're just like America.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
Beyond specific effects of particular groups of viewers, racial images packaged as entertainment can skew the way all viewers understand and categorize people. Popular media can have a negative impact on whites' perception of people of color, and racial stereotypes in film and television can exacerbate pre-existing racist fears. One study finds that popular media depictions of non-verbal features of people of color, including facial expressions and body language, influence racial biases for white viewers. When there is a lack of contact between racial groups, people tend to rely on media stereotypes to formulate ideas about people outside of their own race. For instance, stereotypes depictions of Latin people in the media can lead audiences to associate immigration with increased unemployment and crime. Furthermore, the media's tendency to fuel racial misperceptions can contribute to public support for harsher punishments for people of color. In the first season of The Boys, when Homelander is literally introduced murdering someone in broad daylight, I questioned the air of superiority which allowed us to turn away from this moment so quickly. Maybe it's the public perception skewed by Vought Media, creating a god out of a man with yellow hair. Social discussion is my freak. I am but a white blood cell in the collective consciousness of society, and it's time to throw hands at socially developing cancer again. The collective consciousness of the internet coming together can be good, okay? I've seen a lot of good come from collective online action, like the deplatformation of weird dudes with mics, Sneeko, Andrew Tate, Fresh and Fit. I've even seen y'all help boost the fundraisers of people to the point where they can retrieve their family back from the most hellish conditions on earth. I've seen social media been used to organize mass protests like student encampments, which are still going strong. I support y'all. U of A, don't give up. McEwen, don't give up. Anyone, Edmonton, Tarb is with you. This is the one time I've been proud to be an Edmontonian for real. I'm a proud believer in good. But like everything, the internet contains multitudes. Y'all heard of South Park, right? My first introduction into the critical analysis of these characters came with childhood interactions with friends. And notice how I said I live in Edmonton. So these interactions were mostly with white kids, fueled by the normality of racial bigotry that show got, in tandem with the normality of racial bigotry Edmonton has. All of a sudden you see me getting a lot of token comments. Like, compare us. I look like the drag version of this dude. We are not alike. With time, I understood that these backward comments on my character is exactly what South Park is kind of critiquing.
Well, you know, with our boys starting to become so close, we thought we'd better get the families together. If they're friends, then we need to be friends, huh? Do you mind if I post this? Check out our friends. Randy, I hope you didn't invite us here because we're black.
The fact of the matter is we're living in a world of converged media. What I'm saying is when you etch the letters upon the bosom of digitality, make sure you know your place in hell when you tweet, Starfire started mewing. Y'all made that girl get plastic surgery. And for that, we're beefing forever. Before we get into that though, first things first, this man is more than just another fearsome white boy. There's more intricacies that Homelander embodies. Homelander symbolizes absolute jurisdiction of thought, solidification of identity, the weird white boy mommy conservative fetish. He's the holy trinity of Caucasian.
The show is many things. Subtle is not one of them. If you think Homelander is the hero of this show, I just don't know what to tell you besides like seek therapy.
This video will be a fun one discussing meta conversations, more specifically media literacy surrounding shows of satire like The Boondocks, South Park, and of course, The Boys. Patreon raid! And if y'all want to help me get these videos out sooner, join my Patreon. You can help me pay rent, eat food, edit, live, breathe. What iCarly said in their theme song. I'm kind of like iCarly, but like the black version. You know, I'm trying to do that. Link here to help. It starts at $3 a month, but goes up if you're rich. Thank y'all to everyone in the Patreon. The Patreon has been growing very quickly recently, and I have to shout that out to y'all. Thank y'all. Act 1, structural functionality.
This is the second season of The Boys. It has been released during a presidential election year, but this season and this year, everything just sort of feels different. What is the biggest difference in how season 2 felt during the last election compared to how season 4 feels right now?
More ominous to me.
More on the
nose.
On the nose, I think, yeah.
Tulkit Parsons, a classical figure of structural functionalism, wrote, "I conceive of political organization as functionally organized about the attainment of collective goals, i.e. the attainment or maintenance of states of interaction between the system and its environing situation that are relatively desirable from the point of view of the system." Parsons, 1961. From the viewpoint of the system, the polity exists to form specific functions and meet certain needs generated by society. In particular, it exists to provide a means of attaining desirable collective goals by being the site of collective decision making. Respectfully, f the system. I ain't been complacent since I was 3, and that's cause y'all put bubblegum in my toothpaste. Social structures create shapes for our lives via family, community, religion, etc. They determine way more about your thought processes than you care to admit. Each social structure has social function. You know, a food bank regulates excess for those who need it. Homeless shelters are stand-ins for houses when we consider the unfortunate. A dap up with your friend solidifies friendship bonding. The warmth of human skin. Or so we think, right?
Well, we still looking for a place for you. We're gonna try to put you in a 2-man apartment. They go on and on with this. I told you I was out here since the winter.
Structural functionalism, or functionalism, we don't have to be too academic, is a sociological theory about Western society that we've been low-key taught is the truth of social order. It's a macro-level theory, which essentially means it's a way of categorizing social functionality at a societal scale. Functionalism sees society as a complex system whose parts work together to promote solidarity and stability. Much like a car with all its moving parts does, you know, the engines, to be honest, I don't know much about cars. Or a body does with human anatomy, like your lungs pumping blood throughout the rest of your body, your nervous system sending messages to your brain, controlling how you feel and how you react, things like that. Let's say you take a major organ like the heart out of your body. Would you still be alive? Functionalism means that institutions and systems work together. An unseen equilibrium keeps society balanced, and rapid change can't exist. When it does, it has to be minimum. Like maybe take out the appendix, like not the heart. We'll never see an overcorrection of this machine. It's like if someone told you all your hardships, be it the economic toll of university, the dread of corporate compliance, the fact you dated a SoundCloud rapper is all on you. Socially, we can make little changes like voting in a new person to instate new policies, or touching grass in order to subdue depression. Although to be honest, a SoundCloud rapper, what were you thinking? Them crying voice notes gonna be sampled over a 2000s anime opening. Congratulations, they're rapping over your crying to Bluebird. In a lot of ways, structural functionalism forms a bias as to how we comprehend societal practicality. A lot of people have belief in this system. A lot of people think this is how Western America should be, and this is how it should work. Herbert Spencer's expressed belief in functionalism proved especially evil. We have to unpack the ramifications of this boy's imaginative society before we go forward. To begin, he was a British sociologist born in 1820, witnessing the rise of the Industrial Revolution. He was trying to find a moral code strong enough to demolish the traditional faith of British people. Ultimately, he judged moral decisions based on a survival of the fittest method. Liberty of each limited by the liberty of all is the rule and conformity with which society must be organized. Individual happiness is most completely achieved when individuals are free to decide what makes them happiest. It should be guaranteed. Sounds like a great idea, right? Until you hear him say, the ill-fitted must suffer the evils of unfitness, and the well-fitted profit by their fitness. These are the two laws species must conform to in order to thrive. Because of Herbert Spencer's innate fathamizations of colonial Britain, he saw the disparaging effects of war as needed sometimes, you know, because the fittest survive. This same thought process of a dog eat dog, get it on your own, derives mainly through his dated and backwards ways of understanding latent and manifest function. In a sense, Herbert Spencer is like your average American. Let's get into it. Maddie, you gotta catch this.
Hi, I'm Maddie Merlin, and I made YouTube videos about feminine philosophy, so know what you're thinking. About cheese, probably because you're a lactose intolerant in denial, but how am I in any way qualified to talk about Herbert Boop. Well, I'm not really qualified, but I am, in fact, a gourmand of the variety. So let us travel down these pipes to the very beginnings of sociology itself. Like that tennis rat in the Challengers Flushed Away movie. No, okay. Sure. It's cool that Auguste Comte is known as the father of sociology, but Emile Durkheim is the big theory daddy of structural functionalism, when he was really just, taking all that stuff from Herbert Spencer, using that whole animal organism analogy. Yet he was an important figure as sociology initially followed an essentially psychological model. Societal ills resulted from problematic individuals, and society was a consequence of human nature. Durkheim, however, reorientates the framework to regard individual ills as symptoms of generalized societal and institutional problems that can be studied as social facts. In doing so, he transforms sociology by supposedly legitimizing it as a real hard science and, popularizing structural functionalism, which Turb explained excellently. Way to go, Turb! Well, Durkheim fell out of favor for a century or something. I don't know, I'm a YouTuber, I don't do math. Post-World War II, suddenly classical sociologists were the hot shit. I don't know why I'm continuing on with these toilet metaphors. After the turbulence of World War II, the US government made a concerted effort to reinforce conformity to and the stability of white middle-class values. American culture shifted, so sociology shifted with it. Now the incredibly popular structural functional approach mainly studied the structure of society, how institutions are organized, and how they fit together. And 2, the functions of different parts of society, what role each part plays in the system, and how different parts can contribute to the social order and stability. Structural functionalism did not stay so simplistic and abstract for long. Merton, who studied under Parsons, decided he was worse than a naked toilet roll. He proposed that functions should not just be vaguely defined as the role institutions play in society. He explains two types of productive functions. First, we have manifest functions, the intended and recognized consequences of a social institution or cultural practice that contribute to stability. Latent functions, by contrast, are the unintended, unspoken. For example, a university's manifest function is to prepare students for the workforce and, I don't know, educate. Then you could say its latent function is to segregate people along race, class, gender, ableist, every line possible. Thus, Merton's real innovation with latent functions was that society could be understood as a complicated system that can change. It cannot be a well-oiled, perfectly circuited robot. It highlights what Merton calls functionalism's failed postulate of functional utility. Social systems are harmoniously integrated to facilitate the positive functioning of all individuals and institutions. The postulate of universal functionalism, I think. Standards, cultural ideals, and norms yield equal benefits for everyone. And lastly, the postulate of indispensability. All social functions must exist together for society to work. The former tenets of structural functionalism deliberately ignored that when inequality is the foundation of society, injustice will constitute its definition of stability and equilibrium. Cruel hierarchies will forever remain untouched, reified as normal, natural, and necessary. Do you know what time it is? Time to call a plumber to unclog the world of structural functionalism. You can take that back, I guess.
British people controlling India, Sudan, Canada, America, and 75% of the world was a benefactor of British society. For that reason, war was okay to him, you know? My aim is to show you how the problem isn't individually or subjectively created. Rather, manifest and latent functions in capitalism are reminiscent of larger issues that form what society is over here in the West. Basically, we're gonna be critiquing structural functionalism in a Western connotation to show y'all media literacy as a whole is just backwards. Can y'all tell I haven't slept in 3 days? This post was sponsored by Monster Energy Drink. Yum! So how do we know that functionalism is a bad theory? Bad is a really ambiguous word. What do you mean? Inflation, neocolonialism, and governance are not separate. When society collapses, the system is working as it was designed to. And I know to a lot of y'all, the collapse of Western society would assume the collapse of a benefactory system of goods, since, you know, your family's here, your life's here, you've lived your whole life here. You have a lot of good memories here. I'm here to tell you your good memories are on top of a lot of dead bodies that we never get to see. Remember that structural functionalism is a top-down macro way of looking at sociological functions in human society. I don't mean your peer-to-peer, you dating that person, you having family members, you going out and having fun. Go do that. We're just critiquing what's around us. Now, I'd argue that the system that we're living under needs serious change in the form of societal restructure in order to meaningfully benefit the lives of Western citizens instead of oppress them for a profit incentive abroad. I'm on the other side of structural functionalism. Herbert Spencer is my biggest up. I mean, ask yourself, what keeps structure inside of society that champions freedom as its greatest achievement of order?
Here we go.
Is that Vince McMahon? Keep that in mind, good sir. Corporate politics play a key role in determining what is needed for the good of people worldwide by putting us first. In this way, superheroes are a great way to critique structural functionalism by standing for groups of ethnicities, genders, etc. Especially when the social importance of events like the presidential election, DEI, and queer rights are called into question. Quite simply, diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, is used to describe 3 values that many organizations today strive to embody to help meet the needs of people from all walks of life. Notice how DEI is debated on a large scale as structural abnormality. Recently, Texas went as far as to banning DEI programs and training under the suspicion that it indoctrinated students with left-wing ideology. Just as Herbert Spencer's colonial Caucasian corpse argued 200 years ago, we see the same thought processes today. Conservative thought argues changes to the system need to be minimal. Changes to the system must be minimal. An overhaul of history centered around conservative pride is not ideal for Texas. Anything outside of the sort would be liberal, communist, Antifa, whatever made-up word is next for black maxing activism or queering a binary. People under the invisible hand of Uncle Tom yearn for liberation. They vie for a destruction of their oppression in order for a safer way of living. Queer also signifies the deconstruction of identity, proposing that its very notion relies on bounded coherence that imposes exclusions and limitations on subjectivity. By going beyond the binary definition of straight, gay, or lesbian, and engaging with the concept of queerness, cinema can in turn help us understand ourselves through depictions of identity we haven't come in contact with. Mennel argues that the cinematic queer representations examined in the text enable viewers to engage in the critical discussions that come with representation. Is it accurate and adequate? And allow for the normalization of the broad experiences of queer people of all identities. Wait. You might be thinking, why are we thinking about the rights of so few? Are we overextending empathy? And where does funding Black communities and queer causes really take us in the long run? Let's start with the backwards notion of our normality of peace that we've experienced in the West, okay? After all, what is North America built on? Values, family, religion. Alba, Texas, a book by Sandra Burge spanning from 1834 to 1943, recalls the history of Alba, Texas. Throughout this book, you reminisce on the sanctity of community Sandra paints through the individual stories of families present in this region. Sandra, going through all the trouble of documenting a 100-year history of the region, was rewarded, rightfully so, by having her book present in Alba's curriculum. The piece we're finding in Alba, Texas, was made from communal adherence towards social norms, education, and familial values. Oh, and this sign! However, the underbelly of Alba isn't mentioned aside from the rumor about its name being a signifier of a sundown town. It's pretty blatant. The sign, look at it. See, conservative thought sees ethnic groups or queer people having their histories accurately reflected as an unnatural change in the system which is somehow reminiscent of a natural harm its existence brings to the sanctity of peace white people enjoy in the West. A world of fantasy because the most fit are basically socially uplifted and renowned. I'd argue the social portrayal of Caucasians actually helped them to make them the most fit in America. I mean, Aboriginal peoples across the continent were systemically wiped out, placed in boarding schools, forced to forget their ideations of society in favor of the settlers' supposed vision for a new world on their soil. And guess what's happening in Hawaii? The military is still actively occupying it, trying to lease it for like this much money.
The U.S. military is the greatest debt to life to the people of Hawaii. No other nation on earth has stolen our land, poisoned our water, and displaced our people at gunpoint. Only you. Only the United States of America. And now you ask us, a population driven into poverty as a result of your policies, our opinion on the renewal of a lease on land that you stole, that you bombed, that you poisoned, and that you refused to pay for the lease of. In honor of our Ohana and White Night last night, I ask everyone in this room to stand up if you're against the renewal of this lease. Aloha aina. Aloha aina. Aloha aina. I love you, Uncle Kawa. The only conversation we should be having tonight is to set the timeline for the deoccupation of Kahuku and to ensure that there's a budget created to ensure that every bullet fired and every bomb exploded in this region is cleaned up. You stand here tonight as the representative of a commander-in-chief that is actively committing genocide in the world. The only important thing for you guys to do is to look in the mirror, find your values, and turn in your uniforms. And make sure that you clean up on your way home. Moni Papakako.
Aboriginal colonialism and genocide is still alive. This also extends to Black communities taken from communal societies and forced to work for the good of white men who generationally lined their pockets without the reimbursement of monetary services towards Black communities they used for free labor. In the modern day, whether it's Fox News or YouTube.com, silly boys with mics on Kick, or even people in your own circle, you'll often be met with a parrot in the place of a human being, spouting the same bigoted messages of harm they've internalized in social understandings of everyday life, thanks to the historical erasure on the pretense of protecting society from the historical atrocities we've supposedly organically committed. That is, if you were to take the lens of a structural functionalist. Did you know that natural order, as we know it, has actually been rethought many times before, but there was a profit incentive or a violent fight against structural functionality. And this is nuanced, you know, whether it was the Irish being oppressed in Britain and systematically genocided through the restriction of potatoes, or the freedom fighters of the Black Panthers working to defend their community against the corrupt forces of governance the Hoover administration ran on. And when it worked in Philadelphia, Black Panthers were literally firebombed for the supposed good of society. A lot of the time, this fight requires internal and external forces of resistance. After all, we're globalized, right? We can't think of ourselves as small little beings anymore. We're constantly interacting with the international community, whether it be online through Wizard Bassan's post, or through the combined algorithm showing us Megan Thee Stallion's newest song in both Japanese and American TikToks and Instagrams. Internet thingy-mabobbers. In a place like South Africa, discrimination was ended partially because people in North America fought violently for it. One of the big moments for international awareness of apartheid was in 1976, when thousands of Black children mandating that all classes be taught in Afrikaans, killing at least 176 people and injuring over 1,000 more.
What disturbs me more than the policy that you call a policy is the rationale for the policy. The rationale for the policy. You set out 4 principles that you adhere to, and then and I will go over them in a moment. Then you say on page 14, we must not become part of South Africa's problem. We must remain part of their solution. We must not aim to impose ourselves, our solutions, our favorites in South Africa. Damn it, we have favorites in South Africa. The favorites in South Africa are the people who are being repressed by that ugly white regime. We have favorites.
Political violence is never the... I hate you, Joe Biden. The massacre drew more attention to activist calls to divest from South Africa, something the United Nations General Assembly had first called on member states to do back in 1962. Campaigns for economic sanctions against South Africa gained steam in the 1980s, but faced considerable resistance from 2 important heads of states, the United States President Ronald Reagan and the United Kingdom Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. Both Reagan and Thatcher condemned Mandela and the ANC as communist and terrorists. Reagan literally vetoed the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act of 1986, but the US Congress overrode his decision with a 2/3 majority, passing the act to impose sanctions on South Africa. The UK also imposed limited sanctions despite Thatcher's objections. The combination of international sanctions placed significant economic pressures on South Africa, which was then at war with the present-day nations of Namibia, Zambia, and Angola. Structural functionalists of today would argue we have nothing to do with the structural of Palestine, South Sudan, Venezuela, without accounting for corporations in our society, like in Canada, who's a gold mining giant and leader in Africa's mining sector. Canadian-owned properties and production in Africa in 2012 was $12.9 billion. Countries such as the UAE, Iran, and Russia are accused of providing cash and arms for the warring parties, with recent reports that long-distance drones from abroad are being used in the conflict. But political violence, right, Joe Biden? We forget how the use of our money fuels wars abroad for our financial benefit. But when we want to lay blame, we look as far as our eyes can see. We come up with names like communism or terrorism. You know, the name terrorist is literally a CIA style for Black people struggling against liberation. They came up with that colloquialism to demerit the very real struggles of people abroad fighting for their own liberation. But to someone that believes this system works for them, all of a sudden a US dropping a bomb on a village becomes an unnatural occurrence you can't fathomize in the ethos of functionality backing your view of structure because the capitalist cock is in your mouth. Act 2. The boys in structure. Raw! So The Boys does a good job in giving you new eyes to look through. After all, what is a protagonist but the eyes through which the world is fathomed? Do you have no superpowers, unfaded hair, and less than $1,000 in the year 2024? Well, you might be Huey. Welcome to the club. The reader identifies with the protagonist, and the protagonist brings a resolution to the conflict in the story. Protagonists not only seek resolution, but they undergo some sort of change as well. Question: in a show where literal superpowers exist, you know, plasma vision, invisibility, atomic manipulation, why is Huey, the powerless, lackluster white boy, the focal point of the story? It's because of how relatable being a sauceless white boy is. We start off with this clip.
Yesterday, hundreds of parents raced to East High School to pick up their kids and give them a hug. One of those moments caught on national TV. Fox News reporter Alicia Acuna, reporting on this shooting, saw her son walk out from the crowd while she was reporting on this. Take a look.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm just finishing this real quick, okay? Okay, all right, are you good? Okay, I'm so sorry. There's no way you would have let your kid walk by.
This moment is parallel excruciatingly tragic instances faced in America. Thank God her child survived. But what about the children who don't? And who do we praise for the delight of having a child come back after a shooting? We've long since known The Boys specifically is set on Earth, a superfied United States, if you will. The only tweaks in the framing of Earth is the fact that the weapons of mass destruction isn't metaphorically the driving force of power anymore. It's now literally the driving force of power. The utility of superpowers shouldn't be lost on the audience. Superpowers commonly reflect a desired strength by hinting at an inner quality. In order for a story to progress, we need catalysts who somehow contribute, critique, or challenge narratives of the show. Remember, we can critique the structure of America, Russia, Canada, Antarctica even, but to do that, we need actors who take the place of citizens, politicians, etc. Actors in the sociological sense, meaning individual or collective organizations, groups, political parties, etc., and participants in social life that interact with other actors or structures. And I think Homelander is a really good actor, both literally and metaphorically. These actors in the show can help us understand the entirety of critique supposed social harmony comes with in our world, with nuance in the context of America narratively. A very tangible way to showcase power we can't see. Power is over-encompassing as the militaristic presence of the United States and all its allies throughout the world, with all its bases, with all its economic exploitation, with all its trillion-dollar companies running amok, with all its billion-dollar companies running amok, is with superpowers. Without saying names, why do members of the UN, you know who, have the power to selectively wipe off ethnic groups off the face of the earth with a vote? As many as 40,000 people have died in Venezuela as a result of US sanctions that made it harsher for ordinary citizens to access food, medicine, and medical equipment, a new report has claimed. The report, published by the Center for Economic and Policy Research, a progressive Washington, D.C. based think tank, says those deaths took place following the imposition of sanctions in the summer of 2017. And it's said that the situation has probably worsened since the imposition earlier this year. This article was written in 2018. Venezuela is still suffering. We're in 2024 as part of the Trump administration's effort to oust President Nicolas Maduro. The normative thought of sociology would say countries like these are a result of bad governance without critiquing our backwards politics. We just see this as an effect of their dysfunctional system instead of ours. Power and privilege that harm whoever society others is how government works. Our ways of understanding are streamlined to prop ourselves up as heroes, so creating a reality where suffering is heard can be eye-opening for people who haven't actively lived scenarios of harm. You know, someone in Venezuela, Palestine, Turkey, Sudan, or the Congo have. In this way, superheroes are a great way to showcase the unseen power of important figures, like when Trump attacks the Venezuelan administration of Nicolas for not adhering to Western corporate demands. Homelander acts as a great stand-in for the severity of power America has on the global stage, and therefore the consequences opposing America would bring you. Because let's be real, sometimes the real application of mass slaughter can be difficult when the terrorists are corpses of Confederate America hopping on stage to yap about golf.
I'm happy to play golf if you carry your own bag. Think you can do it?
It's a 6 handicap of all.
How is it? 8 handicap?
Or yell at immigrants.
Today our cities are flooded with illegal aliens. Americans are being squeezed out of the labor force and their jobs are taken.
Do you see the $5 billion he's comfortably living with while fear-mongering society about some unseen immigrant problem, lining his pockets up more and more and more? Do you see the aftermath of his racist rhetoric contributing to the jailing of the 5 men in New York? Or do you see the suit and the face and just think that's a respectable politician and cheer for him, by proxy cheering for the onwards oppression of those living abroad?
From our black population, our Hispanic population, and they're also taking them from unions.
Oh my God, we're so cooked. This is actually America. I'm not even on script anymore. Wallahi, y'all need to get some dowry in the motherland, kalas. So giving these regular business guys just shouting out rather geriatrically superpowers solidifies power dynamics in a very concise way. You know why you're scared of Homelander. He has laser vision. He could take out your family in an instant. He's above the law. He's sheltered by the adoration of occult rhetoric built for the favor of corporate servitude. The premise of superpowers, who has which and what they symbolize, needs to be emphasized. Huey as a powerless protagonist in a power system he can't take advantage of is ideal for critiquing life inside of a trillion-dollar empire. When Huey is stepped on by corporate powers, we can emphasize and relate because powers beyond our imagination keep us in line because of our lack of it.
Don't you ever besmirch Billy.
This was kind of sad because I was actually cheering for her. She was like blackish. When Huey's killer, A-Train, is seen on live TV saying,
Stepped in the middle of the street.
obviously to Huey, this is blatant misinformation. He was there. He then finds out.
This is a confidentiality agreement.
It's a boilerplate NDA.
I signed this and I can't talk about it.
And is faced with corporate apologies from Vought along with monetary compensation. Each episode of police brutality has emotional and psychological effects on individuals and communities. Witnessing or experiencing harassment, routine unwarranted searches, and deaths that go unpunished send a message to Black communities that their bodies are police property, disposable, and undeserving of dignity and justice. Huey's a metaphor for the reality of justice a lot of victims have to settle with concerning the heroic imaging of police. Where is virtue when virtue can't be sought? The answer is illusion. This is how they sell justice to us. That way, the very valid critique of this system uplifting superheroes that kill people it employs can have all its wrongdoings mitigated by the image of hope that the title superhero gives them, much like
New York police officers have killed at least 7 people this year, including a 19-year-old, an NYPD officer killed a 19-year-old in Queens yesterday.
I'm not going to dismiss the loss of a life of an innocent person that wears a uniform to protect us.
But you do, of the 31 people dead at Rikers and the 19-year-old killed yesterday.
I feel like I don't want to take you out of context, and I don't want people to all of a sudden criticize that you're being dismissive of a young man being shot
Mayor
and
Adams,
killed.
that's not going to work on me.
I'm not trying to.
This does mean that Huey, yes, is situationally good, but good can mean a number of things. I'd argue that A-Train being listed as an antagonist in The Boys wiki still acts as good, or rather a different form of change than Huey does. And look, if you haven't questioned the dichotomy of good and evil through the constructs of structural nirvana, come along, we're diving into world building. Contrast favorable / unfavorable conditions, story-wise, we first have to solidify a sort of normality in a social connotation. In this way, we know what repercussions, or lack of, exist for a character. It's scary when Huey goes against superheroes because he can be killed in an instant. The same way the underlying fear of death stops us from interfering with police malpractice in public. For the longest time, normality in The Boys meant Huey was destined to live in a world where superheroes are allowed to be morally white. But I'd say there's also black that make gray. Vought or Fox or CNN, whatever you want to call PR media, is a company we later find out works to manufacture superheroes from birth as a way to reap profit. A-Train is their moneymaker. More specifically, A-Train is a caricature of tokenized culture commodified into an image of success that Vought, the company that owns him, sells as an image of grandeur. I'd argue in a real-life connotation, Black culture is sold to us via the athletes and superheroes we champion backed by corporate enterprises. LeBron James is an amazing Black person, but why? Why is he an amazing Black person? Because he puts the ball in a hoop at a high level and stays out of Black societal ideations of liberation. LeBron, you did not read that book. We saw that Israel tweet. Calm down, sir. A-Train is literally a parody of this zero to hero trope, the pressures, expectations, etc. The position of limited prominence, though, is highlighted throughout the show. Yes, A-Train can bully people, ruin interracial relationships, and has a domination fetish, while still being a pinnacle of excellence. But he's only as excellent as Vought wants him to be, because he's a useful tool of commodification. We have to delve into his why, pertaining to the reason for being a superhero. You might even find the reason being reminiscent of a lot of ours. Us, like us, like us. Muzzle on the beat. A-Train has used his company-given superpowers, which can be read as a metaphor for the power corporate servitude gives Black people in high positions, to enter into the superhero world and make a name for himself by becoming a corporate slave. Doesn't that sound relatable? Selling your talents by devoting your life to reaching corporate glamour is a hypocrisy of capitalism that we don't talk about enough. The American dream is essentially infiltrating white spaces of corporate servitude without knowing what it entails, since there are very little people who have achieved such high positions of prominence. Thus, when we enter these spaces, it's foreign. Heading into these situations with expectations of grandeur, without knowing that the higher and higher we go into the echelons of economic success, the less and less Black people we'll see, becoming a token of a token of a token. When A-Train reached the place of his perceived excellence, sure, he was happy, sure, he was getting the woman, sure, he had the love and admiration he yearned for his whole entire life, but at the cost of adhering to company standards and becoming a puppet. The significance of A-Train is his usefulness as a form of critique, critique. These companies could care less about your morals, ethics, and culture unless they're benefiting off of it economically. As seen with the slave trade video game, A-Train felt this via his subserviency to the hegemonic melanin-deficient power structure around him. Some call them the Seven. This internally made A-Train feel an inherent disconnect with his blackness, as this mindset of corporate slavery leads to individualism being championed more than community. This is where you're supposed to find gray in the character. The glitz and glamour of black excellence is enamoring. Being able to have financial freedom, a comparable fraction of power his white peers around him had, it's kind of endearing under the American dream, hey. He's faced with reality the hard way though, when during a staged protest against this cop, acting as a mitigator, he brings in the same said lyncher to realize his wrongs. A-Train, being the Oreo he is, naively believes that when the cop is confronted by black people, the same people that have been over-policed, oppressed, and subjected to racial discrimination will in turn forgive him. Yeah, my brother you killed, yeah, that dude that you killed with your cop gun, and the 20 black people you racially profiled with your cop gun and tasers, yeah, they'll just forgive you if you say sorry, I guess. A-Train, being as disconnected as he is, thinks the same officer will listen and apologize for his actions. During this protest, the community, as any that's been oppressed for extended periods of time, rebels in the face of its perpetrator of violence, while the cop fires back. All lives matter rhetoric, escalates the situation, and cripples A-Train's brother for life. No matter how high of a position of power you think you are perceivably in as a black person, your community will suffer, and in turn, you will have to be subservient to the suffering. At least that's the story of A-Train from season 1 to 3. With the familiar framework of social connotation, stories have the power to send unique messages of critique through created characters and scenarios. What if someone was literally a criminal charged in 4 different cases, but still had mass pull, still gets endorsed, still receives a massive amount of funding, and still somehow becomes the face of conservative America? Wild how that works, hey. Hey! Today we're here with Emma. They were in the Wendell and Wild video, and they're here for a part 2. We're here to talk about Homelander, The Boys, and everything that centric. They also released a video about
Hi guys, my name is Emma. I go by Ella Pastoral on YouTube, and like Turb said, I talk about a lot of fandom stuff, but also I like to talk about like social issues from time to time, and I feel like we definitely need to talk about Homelander and practically the fandom surrounding him.
Okay, first of all, what's your ideations of Homelander?
So when I think of Homelander, I think of an all-American hero. Recently, when I posted my What Is Wrong with the Boys fandom, people were coming for me, as I expected, because a lot of Homelander fans are a little unhinged, a lot unhinged actually, because everything Homelander represents is literally what America represents. The fact that he is so individualist, the fact that he is always seeing people less than him, even though he needs said people to accomplish his goals. The fact that, I don't know if y'all remember the season where they needed super villains and they went to like, I don't know which miscellaneous like Arab-inspired country and were just attacking people. And then in order to like set up this whole like super villain thing, they wanted to call this person a super terrorist. And I just feel like that is so one-on-one on how our American society is, where we can go into some country that's not our own, terrorize the people. The people want to fight back because we were terrorizing them, and we will call them super terrorists and try to make it into a whole media spectacle like it isn't our fault. So that's kind of how I see Homelander.
That's exactly how I see Homelander too. And the thing is like, what I feel like I'm getting mad at isn't really the depiction of Homelander, but it's these niggas, right? Like, sorry, crackers, most of them. Let me be honest.
In my comment section, man,
yeah,
I've had a lot of skin folk try to defend him and his actions, and the racists too. It's
damn.
I had to get off YouTube for a week. It was getting crazy.
Damn. Like you said, Homelander represents the idea of America. So like, of course I would be against this figure, right? But that's also why a lot of conservative people or people with patriotic ideals would teeter towards Homelander, because they'd be like, oh, this thing that I've been taught to believe, you know, white man in a business suit or white man in a super suit, swap it out. It's the same thing, right? Donald Trump, Homelander, same thing, right? At the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
And that's my thing of the satire being so good that people don't get that it's satire. A bunch of other conservative media like South Park does this in the form of Cartman and Stan. Everyone knew one of those people in like elementary or something. But South Park is supposed to critique the ideal of a society that allows for a boy like this to like run rampant in society. And Stan's supposed to be like a healthy like co-balance. And you're supposed to be like, oh, I'm siding with Stan more because Stan is like this kind of liberal ideal of look at both sides. But I would argue that even Stan like kind of facilitates Cartman's existence, right? All the adults too and everything, like it's a whole interconnected issue, but Stan specifically just acting the way he does and telling Cartman, no, don't do that. It's like, what are you really doing? Bro was still running amok, bro was still racist, bro still bigoted, right? At the end of the day.
Still friends with him. It's the end, you're still friends with him that gags it. Yeah.
So when I see satire, I see very real world connotations in, I guess, media. My question for you is, what is your favorite like depiction of satire?
To me, at least, I had to say The Boys. That's why when I got on Twitter, guys, please get off Twitter. It's my problem. I be on Twitter. But I was just like, it's so on. I watch it. Yes. And when I watch it with my friends, I'm just like, the satire is so there in your face. But then I look at the people on Twitter, it's like somehow they don't get it when it's so obvious. For example, like, I'm looking at the recent arc. I haven't watched the 2 newest episodes of season 4, but look at the way they do A-Train. A-Train literally is like, I was like a rich boy who then discovered my powers by being trained by like a coach who was like a senator or something. Like, you know, he had privilege. Bots and the company literally is like, yeah, but a rich black boy who, you know, got superpowers, it won't sell well. So now they're doing this whole The Blind Side parody with A-Train. Like, it's so obvious. And I didn't know that people wouldn't get it. Like, to this day, that's why I had to stop reading my comments on the Boys fandom video. Someone was like, how dare you say Trump is like Homelander? I could give you scene for scene, like, comparisons between like Homelander and his current rallies with the whole January 6th thing and do bar for bar. Bar for bar. Like, what are you talking about? And it's just a mess. And people are like, I just don't think you understand. To me, it's so obvious, and to my friends, it's so obvious. But people just, I don't know if they're being purposefully dense or if like they just can't comprehend. Because, for example, right? Did you watch Velma, the series on HBO?
Yeah.
Okay. I watched the first season and it was so obvious that a lot of the jokes that Velma, the character, were making would be towards people like us, like liberal people. It's obvious. It was obvious to everybody because it was like a brown girl saying it. But when it comes to a show that is like predominantly, they're like, no, it isn't like to shame Trumpers or the MAGA people. They're for us. And then that's why I had to like really tap into it, because I'm like, the reason why people aren't really getting that they are the demographic being laughed at is because like The Boys and like Amazon Prime are upholding Homelander as the hero. So obviously, man, they making shirts, they putting him in video games, they made him and Soldier Boy Gilf and Dilf of the year. And spoilers for y'all who like, you know, haven't watched the show, but the only reason that Homelander is, you know, a father figure is because he SA'd someone. And this is your king. People are mad when I said that, but I'm like, I didn't write it, they wrote it, and he's still the Dilf of the year. Huh? Y'all gotta make it make sense. Gotta make it make sense to me.
Yeah. Like, I haven't watched the last 3 episodes of The Boys. Yeah. But I really wanted to just hop in and like critique because of the meta conversations revolving around, like you said, Twitter specifically.
So bad, y'all. Oh my god.
I could never do that. You know when you yell into a cave and it comes back at you? What's that called again?
Echo?
Like, yeah, it's like an echo chamber, right? And in the realms of like normativity, this echo chamber is like not as extreme because of the ideals that America like takes inherently. This echo chamber is just allowed to permeate, and this echo chamber exists under a layer of satire, which is very weird to me because it's like it feels surreal. The Boys is a $1 billion company critiquing a $1 trillion enterprise by using a figure that basically ran a $1 trillion enterprise of like genocide and like profit incentive. And then we're reacting to it as people who are being exploited by both of these things. Even like saying something back to it, there's like so many layers you have to go through.
It feels like Inception.
Yeah,
It feels like we're in the Inception movie for sure. I do want to say this. Just because we do have these critiques of these shows does not mean that we hate these shows. I kept seeing that over and over when I posted my The Boys video. And I'm like, whoa. Just because I don't want to see Mother Milk, get some type of human excrement put on him again, does not mean I hate the show. We can critique the things that we enjoy. And yeah, that's all I have to say.
If you want to watch more Ella Pastoral, these are their links. The links will be in my bio. They're an amazing person. They're my really good friend. Please tune in. Act 2. Conservative media. Would you ever cheer for a character that does wrong? And ask yourself why. Well, I explain South Park, The Stick of Truth, a conservative baby of satire. This is a game rated 10 out of 10 on Steam, 9 out of 10 on IGN, 97% liked by Google viewers, helped jumpstart Let's Plays as a genre on YouTube, and the race is how you set the difficulty.
Don't worry, this doesn't affect combat, just every other aspect of your whole life.
Can I say they had a point? You guys wanted a realistic game, right? The point is, South Park isn't supposed to be taken at face value. It's a satire on life. The overarching context of satire happens to be a critique on social normativity. Comedy just happens to be a vessel South Park uses to point out the fact racial injustice makes the lives of black people harder. Okay, now how do I explain the essay? The alien probing essay. South Park can really do some weird things, get ahead of itself just for the sake of it.
We grew up sort of, I think we were both Python fans and we were both sort of punk rock. Right. We wanted to do a punk rock TV show. And when we were growing up, the way to be punk rock was to be really liberal, because we grew up with Reagan in high school and all of that, but then we moved to, the problem was we moved to LA and we did and then the only way to be punk rock in LA is to be a Republican. Because it's the only way, you're in a party, the only way is to be like, I think George Bush is awesome. Everyone's like, what? Just like, and that really, it's amazing. And when we did Team America.
I've seen Trey do that before too.
Yeah.
You may go into a party and say, just said it.
I think he's great.
That was in Malibu and you just said, I love George Bush and I love my gun. And this lady's face just melted. Her
face melted off.
When is it important to draw the line in the sand between good and bad representation when you're creating flawed characters, Characters that are supposed to be a product of some kind of social normativity we should be against, like Cartman or Riley. First of all, have y'all heard the term woke? The spam phrase of conservative century sweeping through the political streets like Golden State in 2014.
Everything woke turns to shit, okay? It's true. Look at what's happening.
The term woke has recently come into play as a catch-all term describing the portrayal of queer, black, Asian, indigenous, POC, femme characters, etc. My biggest grievance with this term is its lack of definition. Wake. Okay, we're onto something. Using media analysis, one could fathom that the leftist mob ruining America doesn't want you to be awake. Ophthalmologists and criminals everywhere agree. There's a rush against pushing back against the status quo. In my free time for the extra Antifa kick, I love setting gas stations on fire. The utility of woke has watered down the meaning of media literacy. In Republican spaces. Caged its modern day criticism of sociality in a box, and has told it its grievances don't matter, paralleling the ideas of the same actors who hold conservative values. But I'm here to tell you that this isn't new, dear reader. It's historical. For as woke as a Jordan Peele movie is, a Boondocks episode is, a Dear White People show is, South Park critiques the same narrative frameworks. You just like it because it's favorably white. Now, first of all, I don't hate South Park. I'm specifically looking at the way they use comedy as a dagger of change. Courageously stabbing at the errors of society present in everything in the West, yada, 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 yada. You can enjoy what you want. I recently had to pay taxes, and now I realize I'm not spending my time online convincing you what art is bad and what art is good. Consume what you want. There's more to life than arguing over some drawings. However, I do want to delve into its usage of social normality as a tool of media analysis. Again, I'm not saying I hate this. Just sit down and have a conversation with me, please. Eric Cartman, do you know this guy? I've been terrorized by his quips online for the past decade. Eric Cartman is the most notable character on South Park. I normally give characters space in the realms of evil and try to delve into how they may be contributing or creating negative harm for the depictions of persons they embody. But that's the thing. It's hard to pinpoint racism, sexism, and homophobia on someone that's actively not hiding from. Just like Riley, one of the main protagonists of the Boondocks, written in the same way.
In Riley's defense, it didn't seem like a big deal to me, but maybe I'm desensitized.
Nigga, that's gay. Cut that out.
Parallel these scenes, they're literally identical.
We are really trying to understand this. How is it that you boys think referring to gay people as
in today's world is acceptable?
Because we're not referring to gay people. You can be gay and not be a...
The utility of Riley and Cartman in their respective shows work as forces of chaos against our more delectable choices we would make. In this way, the dynamics of Stan and Eric complement each other. Similarly to every time you hear Riley say something out of pocket, Huey's there to correct him. Stan serves to balance the air of acceptance towards Cartman's vile attitude. Granted, Cartman is Netanyahu in a kindergarten class, Pink Panther spat. Whatever he says, does, or thinks isn't supposed to make ethical sense. In Stan's words, he's just not kosher. But Cartman, like Riley, Huey, and Stan, are a part of a bigger whole. You see, you shouldn't like the things Riley and Cartman say, but you also shouldn't like the social factors at play, which create kids who think in this way. Let me explain. This is Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the creators of South Park. The Colorado University Award-winning duo bonded and formed a connection over their shared similarities in regards to humor. We can clearly see this in the way in which the duo critiqued America through their use of satirical comedy in their initial university assignments. Freakishly enough, one of these projects got picked up by George Clooney, and the rest was history. For good reason too. It's almost genius how South Park rattles social complacency by using a veil of adolescence as a caveat, although Cartman is a useful tool for unmitigated hatred. One could point to the weight of Cartman overemphasized almost all the time, contributing to a trend of negative historical depiction of fat people in media, which also has social ramifications of harm. And when you look at the cast and realize the first black character we meet is a lunch man who just loves white women, and the other is a black kid who they had to rework a bunch of different times because they had no vision for him, then had to cover it up in some kind of gotcha moment. Trey, I have receipts. Things start adding up a little. The case today, however, lies in the special Into the Pandaverse, like Into the Spider-Verse, but the white version. Literally. This special works to critique the aspect of diverse implementation seen in Into the Spider-Verse and Hollywood as a whole.
Put another gay diverse woman in it. Make it more lame.
Throughout the movie, Cartman is in a paranoid state induced by a dream where he lived in a diverse world. Those who have survived the frigid small town lifestyle, congratulations on your seasonal depression. Now we have to understand the attachment to the idea in order to properly digest how his paranoia is set in a false standard. Remember, we said he's Cartman. You wouldn't be agreeing with the fact he visualizes himself in a black woman scuffing down KFC at a dinner table. What you should actively be engaged with is the reality South Park is portraying. Diversity is defined by the perception of normativity this man had to endure. I mean, why would Cartman be having these dreams? Into the Pandaverse, writing Cartman as a Twitter user bent on the downfall of women, theorizing about the replacement of white men, is useful for stating the points of irrationality a lot of white people have been subjected to.
At its heart, wokeness is divisive, exclusionary, and hateful. It basically gives mean people a reason. It gives them a shield to be mean and cruel. Armored in false virtue.
South Park, the anti-woke child of conservative media, is taking a stance against white replacement. But the main point of Into the Pandaverse comes with Randy Mosh and his quarrels with technology. Although I have love and hate for that point, today we're just going to take this as a structural win because, yeah, a little bit. South Park understands systemic issues need to be addressed. However, with all the praise I give it, South Park, while challenging white normativity through comedy, also becomes a bastion of community for the audience it critiques, meaning wealth barriers surrounding the idea of billionaires going into bidding wars, maybe a contingency of apartheid fueling that billionaire's lived experience won't. Because let's be real, the handyman is a metaphor for millionaires, billionaires, trillionaires at this point. Essentially, you can swap this guy out with Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg. South Park portrays them as blue-collar workers drawn to buying an app. But can you blame them? South Park's use as a tool of excavation falls short with its form.
I'm not interested in sitting around and agreeing with people. Right. And where we live is like the liberal part of the world. And not because
there's a group think.
There's a group think, and you only get to some new truth by argument and by dissent, and it's like some of it is just, we just play devil's advocate all the time. You know?
Here's what else you said. I am just sick of actors on CNN parroting what they read in the paper. I keep expecting Larry King to say, and now for a word on Iraq, the Cookie Monster.
You wouldn't try to eat soup with a fork. You wouldn't try making fire with a repackaged Taylor Swift album. So would you expect a show ran by two white men centered around the idea of white community, tackling these conversations through four little boys, to actively depict the flawed infrastructure of racialized genocidal adherence in South Africa, which led to Elon Musk to become a billionaire? South Park can sometimes be coupled with the stereotypical portrayal of black people, women, indigenous people, Asian people, Latino people, through jokes of racial degradation from a normative position, like punching down. It just seems tacky. At the end of the day, South Park is made by these two creators who are just against the status quo. This centrist approach to critique still limits the writers to pulling on racist rhetoric or devil's advocate arguments for a sense of structure. In this way, I agree and don't agree with a lot of what South Park does. In this episode, I appreciated the critique of how capitalism functions off of sweatshop labor. You kept the critique off of Indian stereotypes specifically and focused on the corporations running the country. However, the core theme of industries destroying the environment and creating oppressive workplaces falls short when you realize throughout the episode, South Park continually paints Japanese people as dolphin killers. When they actually, quote, began to participate in the modern whaling industry around the 1890s. Whale meat consumed in Japan was an affordable source of protein during the malnourished years after World War II, with annual consumption peaking at 233,000 tons in 1962. However, whale was quickly replaced by other meats, and supply has since fallen short to around 2,000 tons in recent years, according to fishery agency statistics. Don't forget that this was an after effect of one of the biggest bombs ever dropped ever. So where was the same level of critique for the US's bombs dropped on Hiroshima creating that industry? At a surface level, we can see why conservatives teeter to this form of structural critique more often than not. Because South Park sits so easily in the experience of whiteness as a whole, a centrist position can be seen as plausible in the eyes of a regular middle-class family not as urgently experiencing oppression as others. Okay, so to talk about the way South Park critiques social normativity, we're acknowledging that South Park was born out of a need to sort out social norms, which are backwards to an extent, right? In America, right? Well, to explain at a surface level, South Park's works amazingly. But what happens when you're one of these groups being targeted? What does perspective have to do with understanding critique? Hey, I'm with Toonrific Tariq. If you're like me, you've probably been watching his YouTube channels for like a good chunk of like life. I'm super excited. I thought it'd be interesting to like poke your brain about world building. Like, covered a lot of animated series like The Boondocks, South Park, and like The Simpsons. And I know a lot of these answers because your videos stay on my recommended. But firstly, like, introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Tariq. I do video essays on cartoons. I'm a cartoonist myself. Yeah, I think that's it.
First of all, why are reviews so important to you?
I would notice things in cartoons and stuff like that, and I would like talk to like my family members about it. And I don't feel like watching anything with you. All you want to do is point to it and point something out and talk about it. But then when I got online and I saw everybody like kind of did that with like different things, being analytical about media like makes you appreciate the media more. And I think being around like-minded people and watching reviews and stuff like that sharpens your skills of like how you pay attention to like certain things in media, and that's what I've learned, because like you can recontextualize something for someone. There's so many times I've talked about a show and people have been like, I didn't care about this at all until you like at least showed me why people care. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that's really it helps the media live on, and it helps you like really figure out what the artist is trying to say, or maybe get your own interpretation out of it.
Like photography or anything like in animation, there's a saying, it brings out the unconscious and the conscious, right? It's like a telescope on a subjective view, but everyone experiences this telescope differently, in my opinion, because it's just like real world iterations, and like maybe you're watching the Boondocks and you're not black, some shit like that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
A lot of it's gonna go over your head. So the like reviews are like a telescope into a telescope, you know? It's like, and right. I know you're the creator of the Hey cartoon revolving around like a black couple and a black cast. Were there any themes you consciously set out to explore?
Really, it was more reactionary to black sitcoms that I grew up with, and like a lot of people like my age grew up with. So like, you know, like Martin and My Wife and Kids and stuff like that. Love those shows. They're really funny and they're great. But at the same time, you always just kind of have like the guy that is really immature and he's kind of like a man child, and he like belittles his girlfriend, and like every episode ends with him like figuring out, maybe I shouldn't be so stubborn, and then he like ends up doing the same shit next week. And again, really funny. Obviously it's a formula that works. But I watched something like Bob's Burgers where Linda and Bob really love each other, and there are like a bunch of lines that they wouldn't cross. They don't belittle each other, like they like talk things out and figure it out, you know what I mean? No issues are like gonna break their marriage kind of thing. And I realized that there isn't any, or maybe not that many, like black examples of that, especially not in animation. So it was really to explore that, to like kind of can you make Black people that really love each other funny? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is the only way to make a funny like Black sitcom where like where people are a couple, is the only way to do that with them like kind of being at odds and like one of them has to be an asshole. I don't think it has to be that way. So that's really like that's the main thing that we're exploring with it, is like that.
With that though, how do you know what to write?
You always hear about people like taking from like people that they know and like kind of like using that to make characters. But what I did, especially for the main two characters, is they're just kind of like both halves of who I am. So it's kind of like, for a little bit, at least writing the pilot, it was kind of like an internal like monologue thing. It's like, okay, well, I would probably say this to myself, and like it just kind of like went back. And they always say write what you know. You know,
it's effective though. It works. It works.
Yeah,
I love that cartoon. Do you think there's a difference of satire revolving shows like South Park and your show?
Yeah. I think something like South Park, it goes out of its way to say like, oh, okay, there's this thing going on and like, here's all the aspects of it. Not every episode, obviously, because South Park still has like rich characters that you care about and stuff like that. But there's still episodes where they go like, now we're specifically gonna approach this and talk about this. You watch something like King of the Hill, for example, which is closer to like what we're doing, and that is a relentlessly satirical cartoon that puts its characters sometime in situations that that satirize the real world a little directly, but it's not necessarily direct. It's more about the satire more comes in like their personality, something that a character says, you know, their character type.
Yeah, I get it. I just recently started watching when King of the Hill went on. I was way too young to understand it, to be honest. Like, it was one of those shows.
It came out like the year I was born.
yeah. But I started watching like a bit of it because I've been just seeing it on my illegal streaming. There's specifically with the one episode with the car dealership. You know what I mean? And he's gonna go buy a car, and he's like trying to debate the tag and everything. He gets scammed. All of a sudden, the place gets like firebombed and everything. I love how King of the Hill kind of it is a satire, but it's placed in like a very real like normalcy. You know what I mean? Like when you look at like Hank, I'm guessing a lot of people back then could like be like, oh, that's one of my friends when you look at this person.
Right.
And I think South Park is that way with like a lot of I guess white normativity with like little kids. Like, you know, I knew a Cartman growing up, honestly. I knew a Cartman growing up. I knew like a Stan, I knew like people like that.
Right,
yeah. And in the same way, the Boondocks resonates heavily with me in that way and lends a satire in a way like I can really understand. Like when I see Uncle Ruckus, I'm like, damn, there's a lot of, without saying, there's a lot of people, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think the Boondocks too is like, it's like really, I've always thought that cartoon was interesting because those characters are like, you think about like when we just talking about King of the Hill or even South Park or like Simpsons and stuff like that. You think about those characters. I can tell you what happened to them when they were like 5 years old. They show you flashbacks and stuff like that. Like they really get into the psyche of who these people are, what their relationships are to each other. But the Boondocks has always kind of operated with those characters. It's just like character types. Riley is like a very specific articulation of a very specific kind of like young Black boy. Huey is like a parody of like militant people and stuff like that. Granddad, like Ruckus, like, but like at the same time, I don't know what happened to their mama, their daddy, and they don't explore that. And at the same time, you don't really like get on them for not exploring that because it's like a different written show. So yeah, I always thought that show was interesting for that.
To that extent though, what makes for a great story?
I think it depends on the tone that you're going for, because I could say it's like, oh, you have to care about the characters, and you know, there has to be like some kind of end goal and you have to resonate. But you know, at the same time, I just talked about it recently in the video. There's a Boondocks, the third season finale. He's going down with like the terrorist stuff and everything like that with Huey and Ruckus. And that one is so stupid. It's ridiculous, but it's a fun story. It's really is really engaging. It doesn't mean anything. Like they're not asking you to really care like about like Huey and Ruckus, what they have going on internally. But it's still a really fun story. And I think really it all starts with the foundation you lay with the characters. I think you have to make characters that you don't necessarily have to care about, but you have to like. The people have to like who they're looking at, or like watching them. Because even if it's a villain, think of any classic Disney villain. Certain ones, if you see them, like it might be on site, you might want to like punch one of them or some shit like that. But you still watch those movies and you still sing the villain songs because like they're still fun characters. You still like seeing them be mean, you know?
Yeah, that's what I think. My ideation around villains revolves around, because growing up I watched a lot of like Dragon Ball Z and like shit like that, and Vegeta was one of my favorite characters, but not for like a good majority of Dragon Ball Z. For a good majority of Dragon Ball Z, my favorite character was like Gohan. Right, I love the come up story. Not gonna lie, I love the I love the destined for power, whatever. But like the more and more he like fought people and like lost and fought people and lost and fought people and lost, like I found myself like cheering for this person to like overcome something and like take a victory, because the last victory he took was like not even like half to Goku, right? Like not really a victory, but like half to Goku. And to me, when I was cheering for Vegeta, it wasn't really like, oh, you're cheering for a villain. Oh, Piccolo said it so well. He said, we're not cheering for Vegeta, we're cheering against Cell. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel you. Yeah.
What makes for a good villain?
I don't know if this is the first thing people go to, but at least for me, it's the first thing that comes to mind. You gotta get a good actor. That actor has to be believably nasty, like delightfully nasty. You know what I mean? Like you think of like Scar and Lion King, the first thing I think about is Jeremy Irons' voice. I think about that before I even think about the design. You know what I mean? I think somebody that's able to like bring that performance out, I think that really helps shape a really good villain. But even then, like there's always a good backstory. All the great villains have a good backstory. Really intimate ones that are like, oh man, that's kind of fucked up. Like a Toy Story 3, the bear, Lotso's like, oh man, he was fucked up. Or you think of like on like the sillier end of things, there's in the Bob's movie, there's Felix, and his motivations are ridiculous and it is very silly, and he sings the most ridiculous song. It's like almost inaudible, like you can barely hear what he's saying, but you still get why he's upset even if it's ridiculous. So I think the perfect villain is a good marriage between the backstory that you can resonate with and understand, and a really good actor portraying them.
Yeah. All right. Those were all my questions. Thank you so much for like hopping on and everything. Like this was a long time coming. If y'all probably already heard of them, but like their links are here regardless. Like they're myself.
Yeah, put me right on my
Act 3, Satire and Villainy. Satire is a way of writing about a flaw or failure in society by inflating it to absurdity. Satire as a literary genre uses a wide variety of literary techniques, such as exaggeration, humor, and irony. Satire can be a useful tool when stressing an overlooked malpractice or historical consistency in humanic trains of thought. Get Out hosts one of my favorite moments of satire. It's a movie revolving around the dangers comfort can bring you in the midst of unfamiliar waters, i.e. Therian wife meets nonchalant dreadhead. Audience, what feeling does this shot evoke? What does this sound elicit? Why is he falling? Well, this whole scene is a metaphor for losing yourself. I had this hellish image, Jordan Peele says, and I thought this idea of, what if you were in a place and you could look through your own eyes as if they were literal windows or a screen and see what your body was seeing, but feel a prisoner in your own mind, the chamber of your own mind. The moment I thought of that, it immediately occurred to me the theme of abduction and connection to the prison industrial complex that this movie was sort of presenting a metaphor for. There's a very real experience behind symbolism. Even when it's not depicting a truth, it's truthful. Look for the clue. The fun part about subjective meaning in satire is that it matters. And this scene has gone viral for good reason. It looks like something I'd think of while staring out of a car window on a rainy day, making my way to church. Jordan Peele's satire borders on surrealism too, an artistic attempt to bridge together reality and the imagination. Surrealism Realists seek to overcome the contradictions of the conscious and unconscious minds by creating unreal or bizarre stories full of juxtapositions. Jordan Peele is trying to bridge double consciousness in the mind of a black person to a tangible depiction of caged existence social normalcy brings with it, specifically by shifting the way we see scary. In a traditional sense, creepy would be like the first time you watch The Grudge, the glare of a stained glass painting, the sound of a... Get Out puts us in a normative position with relatable antagonists, a partner's parents. It's time to lock in, right? This situation is scary. The nerves of having to perform for love are something I hope we've all felt before, and if not, don't worry, Jimmy, that first college relationship gonna get you right for sure. However, the unnerving performance of stability our main character goes through, conforming and fitting in order to be accepted by these people, is obviously more than meets the eye. As the movie progresses, we find out the familial actions are scripted for sinister reasons. The pacification of our main character is what's needed in order to eventually control him, literally in this instance, but also metaphorically. The reality of surrealism presented in Get Out is actually viscerally real for a lot of people. In The Souls of Black Folk, sociologist and activist W.E.B. Du Bois states, the Negro is gifted with second sight in this American world, a world which yields him no true self-consciousness, but only lets him see himself through the revelation of the other world. 1903, p. 198. His analysis of the status of African Americans suggests that blackness can only be defined through a definition of whiteness. Thus, a double consciousness emerges. Alice Lansdale writes, the point here is that the sunken place is a place of black paralysis, a place of imprisonment that exists within white liberalism under the banner of the post-racial. In order to escape the sunken place, Chris literally, and we the viewers metaphorically, will need to acknowledge how whites and the discourse of the post-racial itself, which denies the existence of systemic racism in contemporary American society, traps African Americans in the sunken place. The reality is that your media, no matter how old it be, G.I. Joe, Thundercats, Samurai Jack, the Flintstones, all the way up to the Amazing World of Gumball, Adventure Time, Avatar, the Boondocks, South Park, are all contributors to social conversations in their own ways. So why does it feel like we're all experiencing these societal conversations that we're supposed to be on the same page on? We're supposed to partake in kind of the same way so differently. Well, Walter Benjamin in 1935 famously described what he called the optic unconsciousness of photography. Photography as a technology of vision enables its viewers to see both literally and metaphorically. Art is amazing in the way it can warp reality and shift situational perspectives, and I get how not all of ours are the same, which is why we need flawed characters who give us a sense of realistic nuance. The fact is, institutions that build off of the same anti-human rhetoric in order to normalize anti-African sentiments to facilitate gold profit and death in Sudan. Disparagingly backwards ideations of facilitating inner city black folk with cop cities in America through your little funny shows like Brooklyn Nine-Nine. A wrongful view on gender dynamics in order to instill patriarchal roles that uplift men and bring anti-trans rhetoric to the forefront. A gun in the face of you for going to a student protest and wanting this to end. Quote, liberalism and fascism, between myths and reality. One of the most striking as well as most unsavory features of fascism was what Hitler most famously referred to in Mein Kampf as the big lie, namely the fascist radical instrumentalization of truth, its recourse to unbounded propaganda and mass manipulation, personified by the quintessential, at any rate most pernicious, spin doctor of all times, Dr. Joseph Goebbels. Yet this is no fascist invention. Here, as in other respects, the fascists took to the extreme pre-existing developments. While such seamless coupling of liberalism and the liberal flame of mind with openness, transparency, and the unhindered pursuit of truth is doubtlessly politically serviceable, it ignores the fact that liberal society, in its own ways, poses serious obstacles to a genuinely free and transparent discussion, and not simply because liberal principles and procedures are not always followed to the latter. In addition to such deviations, we need to be cognizant of the structural confines of the liberal discourse itself, precisely because it is liberal. The problem does lie with a lot of actors, a lot of individuals spouting racist rhetoric protected by law by their equally evil accomplices. But we don't live in The Boys. We don't live in South Park. We don't live in the Boondocks. We don't live in Get Out. These are realities fashioned to understand what we see in everyday life. When you see a villain, do you clap? Today we're here with Wayne Amations, the creator of Diary of a Red Panda, a series you might have seen on your Instagram Reels or your TikTok, or maybe just as you're scrolling on Webtoons. I feel like stories sometimes fall too much into meta conversations, leaving us to like run wild with our own supposed assumptions of like these tales. So I needed you as a collab in order to tie this together cleanly. But firstly, can you tell us about your series?
So Diary of a Red Panda is about a red panda who their family has settled in central Pennsylvania. So pretty much Red Panda himself isn't an immigrant, but his parents are, and his siblings are also immigrants.
I've seen you answer on Reels, and this made me really love like the message your body of work functions to create. Like the dynamics of the interactions with each of these characters to me is like very interesting because it comes from like a marginalized point of view. How do you establish world building in your stories?
Well, for my series, a lot of the times, a lot of people are unaware of what Red Panda is actually talking about, because he mentions, Red Panda himself is like technically based on indigenous people. So my people are Cham, which are indigenous to Vietnam. Mm-hmm. So a lot of things that he talks about, people kind of brush off, and he's just kind of standing there staring. So like pretty much he's the only one that like knows what he's actually talking about, which is like a common experience for him.
It's kind of like the double consciousness aspect of living like in the West. Immigrant solidarity, me too. I'm like a Dinka person from South Sudan. Now I live in Canada, lived in Edmonton, Vancouver. How do you factor in the idea of a duality of being an immigrant and I guess living in the West externalized onto the story?
Well, growing up, there's not a lot of Cham people around, so there mainly would be closer to Vietnamese communities. But even in then, like they don't know about people necessarily, because it's kind of like cultural erasure and whatnot, and people like it was even illegal to teach the language. So it's pretty similar to how they're treated in the United States, like Native Americans. So it's pretty difficult to form a community.
Well, I love dissecting characters, like getting into like what makes them tick, like their motivations, their innate desires. But it seems like you said throughout the series, Red Panda is just looking for for a found family, I guess, this like community, like a second of coming age in like your teens, 20s, figuring out who's like best for you and navigating life with like a sort of skepticism. But what I love about the Red Panda is how open and available they are to the friends around them. But it seems like it's you play it off very comedically. This skepticism is very good, how did you come up with that? What's the process behind that?
Well, I'm actually glad that you are picking up on those things, because when I was starting the series, everybody would like comment like, I don't get the joke. I don't get the joke. And it's just been a year, maybe like 2 years of people just saying, I don't get the joke. And then after a while, people are like, I relate to this. So I kind of just put it in there because like, say I'm with like other people, we would kind of make jokes that only we would understand. So I kind of just put that as like the joke, so only people that like understand, they kind of understand.
No, that's literally the same thing like me and my cousins do. There's this word in my language called like kawaii jet, and it means white. And like since no one knows, like I don't know, I've never run into like a random person in the street that knew Dinka. So I'd be telling my friends, and I'd be like kawaii jet, and we all be like laughing. And yeah, sorry. This is a harder question because I know you've been posting over a year. Like you have almost like 200 volumes out, by the way. Congratulations. It's very hard to do as an artist to be that consistent. What is the message of Red Panda?
One of the biggest themes is to try understanding everybody, because you don't know their background. You don't know where they came from, or you don't even know how they grew up. Like they could have biases that you might not even know. Be kind, I guess. Be kind. Free Palestine. Yeah. Free Palestine.
Free Palestine. One thing about this video, and bouncing off the usage of North American morality, it's that it's super hard to find glimpses of hope and understanding when day by day I see bombs drop. I know this race has been exciting, but I'm not the boys. I say with clarity, everything I talked about in this video mirrors my perception of the real world. But every so often, when I had to talk to family members and interact with community members, with families directly in Sudan, the Congo, Palestine, I remember the cruelty of the West and the reason why I'm a refugee. Some of y'all can be excited with the lesser evil option, but to me, it never ends. I've seen more posts endorsing Kamala Harris than for relief of my fellow countrymen in Sudan and the Congo. Keep your eyes on them. They will be continually exploited under this government you perceive as normal. Our death is normal. Our death is normal. And I want so badly for someone to make that make sense for me.